The Suzanne Morphew case is one of the most mysterious and heart-wrenching true crime stories in recent memory. On Mother's Day 2020, Suzanne, a 49-year-old mother of two, seemingly vanished without a trace from her home in Maysville, Colorado. What started as a routine bike ride on a peaceful day quickly turned into a harrowing ordeal for her family and an unsolved mystery that continues to perplex investigators and the public alike. A year after her disappearance, the case took a shocking turn. Her husband Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with Suzanne's murder, a development that stunned those who knew the family and followed the case. The charges brought a new wave of speculation and controversy, especially since Suzanne's body had never been found. Before we dive into the mysterious and heart-wrenching case of Suzanne Morphew, I want to invite you to join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. We cover true crime stories, both well-known and lesser-known, exploring every detail and leaving no stone unturned. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date with our latest videos and help us continue to bring you in-depth content on the cases that matter. Now, let's get into today's story. Suzanne Morphew was a beloved wife, mother, and friend, known for her warm personality and deep devotion to her family. Born and raised in Indiana, Suzanne was a high school sweetheart with Barry Morphew, whom she married and shared two daughters, Mallory and Macy. The Morphew family eventually settled in Maysville, Colorado, where they lived a seemingly idyllic life surrounded by the picturesque Rocky Mountains. Suzanne was known for her active lifestyle and strong sense of community. She enjoyed spending time outdoors, whether hiking, biking, or simply taking in the beauty of nature around her. Friends and neighbors often described her as a caring and compassionate person, always willing to lend a hand or offer a kind word. But beneath the surface, things were not as perfect as they seemed. While the Morphews appeared to be a happy, close-knit family, there were underlying tensions that would later come to light. Suzanne had reportedly been struggling with health issues, including a battle with cancer, which had placed significant stress on her and her family. Additionally, there were rumors of marital problems, with some suggesting that the relationship between Suzanne and Barry had grown strained in the months leading up to her disappearance. Despite these challenges, Suzanne remained focused on her daughters, who were the center of her world. She was deeply involved in their lives, from supporting their academic achievements to cheering them on in sports. Her love for them was evident to everyone who knew her, and her disappearance left a profound void not only in her family, but in the entire community. On the morning of May 10, 2020, Mother's Day, Suzanne Morphew was last seen at her home in Maysville, Colorado. It was a day that started like any other, with Suzanne reportedly planning to enjoy some time outdoors, taking advantage of the beautiful weather by going for a bike ride. But by the afternoon, everything had changed. When Suzanne failed to return home, her husband, Barry Morphew, became concerned. According to Barry, he had been out of town that morning for work, and when he returned, Suzanne was nowhere to be found. After checking the usual spots and reaching out to neighbors and friends, Barry made the decision to report her missing. Law enforcement and volunteers quickly mobilized a massive search effort. Within hours, Suzanne's bike was found abandoned near a steep hill, not far from the Morphew home. However, there were no immediate signs of struggle or any clues as to where she might have gone. The discovery of the bike only deepened the mystery. As the search continued, the community came together, desperate to find Suzanne. Search teams combed through the rugged terrain surrounding the area, and dive teams scoured nearby bodies of water. But despite their exhaustive efforts, no significant leads emerged. It was as if Suzanne had simply vanished into thin air. Barry Morphew made an emotional public appeal, pleading for Suzanne's safe return. He offered a $100,000 reward for any information leading to her whereabouts, a reward that was soon doubled by a family friend. Barry's emotional pleas, broadcast across local and national news, painted a picture of a distraught husband longing for his wife's safe return. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, the search for Suzanne yielded no new information. The absence of any clear evidence left both investigators and the public puzzled. How could a woman like Suzanne, who was so well known and loved in her community, simply disappear without a trace. As the days passed and the search for Suzanne Morphew continued, the investigation into her disappearance took on a new intensity. Law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, became deeply involved, combing through every detail of Suzanne's life, looking for any clues that might explain what had happened to her. One of the first major developments in the case was the search of the Morphew home. Investigators spent days meticulously going through the house, looking for any signs of a struggle or evidence that might point to Suzanne's whereabouts. While the specifics of what they found were not immediately made public, the extensive search suggested that authorities were leaving no stone unturned. Attention also turned to Barry Morphew, Suzanne's husband. As the person closest to Suzanne, he was naturally a focus of the investigation. Barry's behavior in the days following Suzanne's disappearance raised some eyebrows. While he publicly appeared distraught and cooperative, there were inconsistencies in his statements and actions that began to draw scrutiny. Investigators also looked into Barry's movements on the day Suzanne disappeared. His claim that he was out of town for work was initially corroborated, but questions arose about the timeline and his exact whereabouts during those critical hours. The data from his phone and the GPS in his truck became key pieces of evidence as authorities tried to piece together a clearer picture of that day. In addition to this, DNA evidence played a crucial role in the investigation. Investigators reportedly found DNA from an unknown male on some of Suzanne's personal items, which added a layer of complexity to the case. This discovery led to speculation about whether another person might have been involved in her disappearance, but it also deepened the mystery, as no clear connection to a suspect could be made. As the investigation progressed, the public began to speculate about what might have happened to Suzanne. Theories ranged from abduction to foul play within the family, but without a body or concrete evidence, everything remained speculative. The lack of definitive answers fueled public interest and kept the case in the headlines. A year after Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, the case took a dramatic and unexpected turn. On May 5, 2021, Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and attempting to influence a public servant. The news of Barry's arrest shocked many who had followed the case closely, raising new questions about what had really happened to Suzanne. The prosecution's case against Barry Morphew was built largely on circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors alleged that Barry had killed Suzanne due to ongoing marital problems, financial stress, and possibly out of fear that she was planning to leave him. According to the prosecution, there were several indicators that the marriage was in trouble, including text messages and other communications suggesting that Suzanne had been unhappy for some time. One of the prosecution's key arguments was that Barry's actions on the day Suzanne disappeared were suspicious. They pointed to inconsistencies in his timeline, the movements of his truck, and the data from his phone, which they claimed did not align with his account of the day's events. Additionally, Barry's behavior in the days and weeks following Suzanne's disappearance, such as the sudden sale of the family home and the removal of security cameras, fueled further suspicion. The prosecution also highlighted DNA evidence, particularly the unknown male DNA found on Suzanne's belongings, suggesting that this could be linked to a potential accomplice or another suspect. However, this evidence was complex and did not directly tie Barry to Suzanne's disappearance or death, which became a point of contention in the case. On the other side, Barry's defense team argued that the case against him was weak and based on speculation rather than solid evidence. They maintained that Barry was innocent and that the prosecution's case was built on misunderstandings and circumstantial evidence that could easily be explained. The defense suggested alternative theories, including the possibility that Suzanne had been abducted or had left voluntarily, and they criticized the investigators for focusing too narrowly on Barry from the beginning. Barry's defense also pointed to the lack of a body as a significant problem for the prosecution. Without physical evidence of Suzanne's death, they argued, it was impossible to prove that a crime had even occurred, let alone that Barry was responsible. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the case became increasingly complicated and contentious. Both sides presented compelling arguments, but the lack of definitive evidence left the outcome uncertain. Public opinion was divided, with some convinced of Barry's guilt and others questioning whether the case against him was strong enough to stand up in court. As the case against Barry Morphew progressed, the legal proceedings became increasingly complex, marked by a series of challenges and unexpected developments. From the outset, it was clear that this would be no ordinary trial, as both the prosecution and defense prepared to present their cases in a courtroom that was already under intense public scrutiny. One of the first major hurdles in the case was the issue of evidence. The prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, which, while compelling, required a strong narrative to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. However, several key pieces of evidence became points of contention. The defense filed numerous motions to exclude certain evidence, arguing that it was either irrelevant or had been improperly obtained. In particular, the defense challenged the admissibility of some of the DNA evidence, as well as the interpretation of the data from Barry's phone and truck. These legal battles over evidence were crucial, as they had the potential to significantly weaken the prosecution's case if the judge ruled in favor of the defense. Another complication arose from the delays in the court proceedings. As the case dragged on, the defense pushed for a speedy trial, arguing that Barry had a right to have his day in court. However, the prosecution requested additional time to investigate new leads and gather more evidence. These delays only added to the tension surrounding the case, as both sides prepared for what was shaping up to be a lengthy and contentious trial. In a surprising twist, some of the evidence that the prosecution had planned to present was excluded by the judge. This included certain statements and data that the prosecution had hoped would bolster their case. The judge ruled that this evidence had either been improperly obtained or was too speculative to be presented to a jury. These rulings were a significant blow to the prosecution, as they removed some of the most critical elements of their narrative. As the trial date approached, it became clear that the case was far from straightforward. The legal proceedings were marked by a series of twists and turns that left both sides grappling with how to proceed. The exclusion of evidence, coupled with the ongoing delays, created an atmosphere of uncertainty, leaving many to wonder whether the prosecution would be able to secure a conviction. In a dramatic and unexpected turn of events, the charges against Barry Morphew were dropped in April 2022, just weeks before the trial was set to begin. The decision to dismiss the charges stunned both those closely following the case and the general public, leaving many to question what had led to such a significant shift in the prosecution's strategy. The prosecution cited new developments in the investigation as the primary reason for dropping the charges. They revealed that they were pursuing a new lead involving an unknown suspect, potentially connected to the unidentified male DNA found on Suzanne's belongings. This revelation suggested that there might be another person involved in Suzanne's disappearance, someone who had not yet been identified or apprehended. Additionally, the lack of a body remained a critical issue for the prosecution. Without concrete physical evidence of Suzanne's death, the case against Barry had always been precarious. The prosecution acknowledged that continuing to trial without having found Suzanne's body would make securing a conviction extremely difficult, especially after the exclusion of key pieces of evidence. Despite the charges being dropped, the investigation into Suzanne Morphew's disappearance remains active. Authorities have stated that they are continuing to follow leads and explore new avenues in the search for answers. However, as of now, no new suspects have been arrested, and Suzanne's body has not been found. Barry Morphew, who had always maintained his innocence, was released from custody following the dismissal of the charges. His defense team reiterated their stance that Barry had been wrongfully accused and expressed relief that the charges had been dropped. However, the ordeal had already taken a significant toll on Barry and his family, who had been living under the shadow of suspicion for nearly 2 years. The decision to drop the charges did little to resolve the lingering questions surrounding Suzanne's disappearance. For many, the case remains an open wound, with the truth still out of reach. The lack of closure has left Suzanne's family, friends, and the broader community grappling with uncertainty and grief as they continue to hope for answers. The Suzanne Morphew case remains one of the most perplexing and unresolved mysteries in recent memory. Even with the charges against Barry Morphew dropped and the investigation still ongoing, there are many lingering questions that continue to haunt those who followed the case closely. What really happened to Suzanne on that fateful day in May 2020? Was she the victim of foul play, or is there another explanation for her disappearance that has yet to be uncovered? And if foul play was involved, who was responsible, and why has the evidence been so difficult to piece together? The case has left many unanswered questions, not just for Suzanne's family, but for the entire community that rallied around them during the search. The fact that Suzanne's body has never been found adds a layer of heartbreak and frustration to an already tragic situation. Without a body, definitive answers remain elusive, and justice seems out of reach. For the Morphew family, the ordeal has been deeply painful. Barry Morphew, though now free from the legal charges, continues to live under the cloud of public suspicion. Suzanne's daughters, Mallory and Macy, have had to navigate this tragedy in the public eye, grappling with the loss of their mother while the world speculates about what might have happened. The case also raises broader questions about the criminal justice system and the challenges of prosecuting cases that rely heavily on circumstantial evidence. How do you build a case when the most crucial piece of evidence, a body, is missing? And what happens when the evidence you do have is open to interpretation or is excluded from the courtroom? As the investigation into Suzanne's disappearance continues, the hope for answers endures. There are still many who believe that the truth will eventually come to light, that Suzanne's story is not yet over. But until that day comes, the case remains a painful reminder of how difficult it can be to find justice, especially when the path forward is shrouded in uncertainty. If you found this video insightful and want to see more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue to explore these complex cases and bring awareness to the unresolved mysteries that still haunt the families involved. We'd love to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.